YouTube, what's up, man? It's your boy, the one J Osh. Welcome back to the show. Hey, look. First off, for starters, on the road to 1,000 subscribers, we getting there. Your boy is tired. Your boy looks rough. Your boy got off of work, and I'm making this video. Now, this video is the most controversial tornadoes in U.S. history. My tornado fiends, where y'all at? Nah, but the crazy thing, the reason I picked this video, first off, it came out. Shout out to CF Productions. Appreciate you. But the reason I picked this video is literally because today, while I was at work, we had a tornado warning in Georgia. There was a tornado that touched down. I think it was a little bit north of us though, but you know, in the vicinity. Because it was pouring. I heard it like in my job. I heard it hitting the roof. I know what y'all thinking. Josh, did you go see? No. I told y'all I am not hunting no tornadoes. I'm not looking for them. So, but yeah, there was a tornado warning, and I was like, well, dang. I should give y'all a tornado video and tell y'all the story. So, why do I feel like I got some of my teeth terrible? So, yeah, that was it. For like 10 to 15 minutes, we was in the like locker room or like the bathrooms, and yeah, I was looking on my phone the live coverage of it. You know what I'm saying? There was no video of it, so I don't know if it was even any damage. I think it was very brief. But yeah, so now we have a tornado video for y'all. So, most controversial tornadoes U.S. history. Shout out to CF Productions, because we're going to watch
On May 20th, 2013, an EF5 tornado tore through Moore, Oklahoma. After that incident, though, the United States wouldn't see another EF5 tornado for another 12 years until June 20th, 2025 in Enderlin, North Dakota. In the time between the two, the U.S. saw tornado after tornado after tornado after tornado after tornado after tornado.
And we've reacted to a lot of tornadoes that I've kind of said that was EF5.
Tornadoes isn't limited to just these 12
or they should have been higher.
It certainly became more frequent during that time. So that got me thinking, what are some of the most controversial tornadoes in U.S. history, which is exactly the topic that we're going to be covering in this video. To begin, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is that while most people will agree that all the tornadoes on this list are controversial to some extent, the order of the list is completely subjective.
Okay.
Also, it's literally impossible to cover all controversial tornadoes in one video, so this will likely just be the first one in the series. To begin, I want to remind everyone of the classifications of both the original Fujita scale and the enhanced Fujita scale, so you have something to reference when we talk about how these tornadoes are rated and why they are controversial. We are going to begin with our number 10 entry, which is the March 24, 2023 Rolling Fork, Mississippi tornado.
Yeah.
This tornado touched down about 10 miles southwest of Rolling Fork at roughly 8 p.m. Central Daylight Time. The tornado quickly strengthened and moved directly towards town at speeds of up to 50 miles per hour, all while shrouded in complete darkness. The combination of darkness, a strengthening tornado, and the rapid forward speed put everyone in the path in significant danger, including storm chasers. As the tornado began to enter town, it took the form of a large wedge, causing catastrophic damage to the downtown corridor. Also, while passing through the town, a couple of storm chasers who lost situational awareness as to where the tornado was were eventually hit. Luckily though, both of these chasers survived, although their vehicles were severely damaged. After passing through Rolling Fork, the tornado continued on its northeast march as it remained on the ground for roughly another 50 miles before lifting. As daylight broke the next morning, cleanup efforts began, along with the damage assessment to try and assign the tornado a rating.
We've talked about it.
Images from Rolling Fork quickly began spreading online, showing buildings leveled with only foundations
To
remaining.
me, that's EF5.
Naturally, this sparked a premature uproar in the community that this could be the tornado that ends the EF5
It's the
drought.
tree damage
However,
too.
after completing their damage survey, the National Weather Service assigned the tornado a rating of a high-end EF4 with estimated wind speeds of 195 miles per hour, or 6 miles per hour short of EF5 status. The 195 mile per hour damage indicator was a flower shop, and the National Weather Service noted, quote, "The floral/gift shop was demolished, with slab partially swept.
I don't know about
Originally built in the 1950s as a house, thus DI2/12 family residence was used." Now, there's a few reasons why the survey team didn't give out the EF5 rating, but one of them had to do with the debris that was found at the scene. As you can see in the pictures, the building is completely leveled, but the debris hasn't been blown far away, and even the building next door sustained only EF3 damage. One of the things that the National Weather Service looks for when trying to determine if a tornado was an EF4 or EF5 is how far debris from a building gets blown downstream, and for this tornado they didn't feel like it was blown far enough away to warrant a higher rating. 1 year later, in March of 2024, Logan Poole, who is a meteorologist and damage surveyor with the National Weather Service in Jackson, Mississippi, gave an interview as to why the Rolling Fork tornado wasn't rated an EF5, and this is what he had to say. So, what gave it the 195 mark? And the best answer to that question is what didn't give it the 200 mark. The Green Apple Florist, essentially a single-family home that was modified to be a floral shop, and it was slabbed to the ground and swept clean. Why not an F5? Why not an EF5? And two things really stuck out to us from the consensus on why not an EF5. One was this building, even though it was extremely
building,
destroyed.
I'm sorry.
On its own, taken out of context, I think most people would agree this would be representative of an EF5 tornado. The damage to that building, if there had even been two of these side by side that had suffered the same fate, then maybe we could have more confidence on that, but we didn't. But it was to that point that we were very, very close, and this is probably about as close as you'll get to that threshold without making it. A question we get a lot is like, how can you be so sure that it was 5 miles per hour from EF5, but not quite there? And the answer to that question is that we aren't. What the EF scale is a damage scale. Is it possible that it had winds that were stronger? Certainly. Moving up to the number 9 spot on the list, and we get to the Rochelle, Illinois tornado from April 9, 2015. This tornado touched down at 6:39 p.m. just to the northeast of Franklin Grove and moved northeast. The tornado rapidly strengthened into a beautiful but monstrous wedge as it approached the outskirts of Rochelle. By the time it reached the Cherry Hills subdivision, it was approaching peak intensity. It plowed through the subdivision, causing immense damage, and it continued marching northeast. After hitting Cherry Hills, it remained over mainly open fields until it reached the intersection of Highway 64 and Highway 251. Unfortunately, the handful of buildings at this intersection stood no chance against the tornadic winds and were flattened. A short time after passing through this location, the tornado, which had slightly weakened, passed directly through the heart of Fairdale before dissipating about 5 miles after town. Within 24 hours of the tornado, the National Weather Service was out and about to survey the damage, with the primary focus being on the Cherry Hills subdivision and the buildings at the intersection of Highway 64 and 251. In the Cherry Hills subdivision, surveyors found that several well-constructed homes had been completely swept away, leaving only bare foundations. The damage here was impressive, with debris also being blown hundreds of feet downstream, but the most interesting damage was at this home. Here, not only was the house slabbed, but the tornado actually displaced part of the concrete walkway, which is something that is rarely seen. The entire concrete foundation of this home was also damaged, which would inevitably spark more controversy. Further downstream, surveyors also came across a farm that took a direct hit and also exhibited extensive damage. At this location, a concrete silo was sheared entirely off of its base. Intense ground scouring with cycloidal markings also occurred here. Cycloidal markings are patterns made in the ground, which are created by subvortices within a very strong tornado. Finally, surveyors concluded with the damage located at the intersection of Highway 64 and 251, which they agreed was at least of EF4 level. Just a few days after the tornado, the National Weather Service assigned an EF4 rating with estimated wind speeds of 200 miles per hour, which is just 1 mile per hour shy of EF5 status. This rating was obviously a major controversy,
Yeah.
as it's literally impossible to tell the difference between 200 mile per hour damage and 201 mile per hour
Yes.
damage. Another area of
That's kinda
controversy
crazy,
regarding
bruh.
this tornado was the speed at which the damage survey was completed.
Oh.
Typically with higher end tornadoes, it takes the National Weather Service at least a week or two to complete the damage survey, but with the Rochelle tornado it took just 4 days, which also included 2 days on the weekend. The combination of these
My
two
bad,
issues
I
has
ain't sound,
undoubtedly
that's my
made the
fault.
Rochelle tornado one of the more controversial tornadoes in recent history. Moving up once again to number 8, and we're going to be talking about the May 12, 2004 Harper, Kansas F4 tornado. Out of all the tornadoes on this list, this one's
reacted
likely
to that
the
one
least
neither.
talked about, and admittedly I had to educate myself about it as well. On the evening of May 12th, a cyclic supercell formed in southern Kansas and went on to produce at least 11 tornadoes. Most of these tornadoes were short-lived and weak, or avoided hitting structures entirely, but tornado number 9 would prove to be different. At approximately 8:30 p.m. local time, the cyclic supercell produced another tornado, which touched down just to the south of Harper. The twister initially meandered very slowly to the east-northeast over mainly open fields. That was until it began impacting a small farmhouse, which was literally the only building in its path. By this time, the tornado had grown into a large wedge and parked itself over the farm for at least a few minutes. Eventually, though, it continued moving off to the northwest, where it would dissipate shortly afterwards, and just before entering the town of Harper itself. When the sun rose the next morning, the extent of the damage on the farmhouse became clear. All traces of the house disappeared, leaving only the foundation and basement remaining. Trees and bushes around the plot of land had either been completely debarked or sanded down to their stumps. Intense ground scouring also occurred, and vehicles from the property were mangled beyond recognition, with various large pieces, including the engines, being completely ripped out. Amazingly, the occupants of the house were home at the time and survived with only minor injuries in the basement, even though it had been filled with copious amounts of debris, which included 2 debarked trees, an automobile engine, a refrigerator, and several other unidentifiable objects. To show just how severe the damage was, this is a picture of the farmhouse taken before the tornado. When the damage survey began, it was apparent that this was a very strong tornado and would more than likely come down to being rated either F4 or F5. Eventually, though, the National Weather Service decided to rate the Harper tornado as a high-end F4. The main reasons for this rating was that firstly, the farmhouse could have been built better, but secondly, and more importantly, the tornado was moving extremely slowly. They believed that the extensive damage caused was more a result of this than the twister's actual strength. In the years since the event, the rating has been a subject of controversy, which would only be stoked even more when Chance Hayes, who worked for the National Weather Service in Wichita, Kansas, and was on the team that rated this tornado in F4, later came out and publicly expressed regret over not rating it higher. Moving to number 7 on the list, and we get to the New Wren, Mississippi tornado from April 27, 2011. As many people are aware, on April 27, 2011, a massive outbreak of tornadoes occurred in the Deep South, with upwards of 200 tornadoes being reported on that single day, and nearly 350 during the entire outbreak. A record number of violent tornadoes also occurred, with 11 EF4s and 4 EF5s. Our number 6 entry was not officially one of those though, even though it has since earned the nickname as the 5th EF5 of the super outbreak. This tornado was one of the first ones to occur on this date and is thought to have touched down near Slate Springs, Mississippi. It initially was very weak and caused only minor sporadic damage. As it approached the town of Anchor though, it intensified quickly and within just a mile it completely flattened a handful of mobile homes. It would continue intensifying as it moved northeastward at a blistering 60 miles per hour. At this point, the tornado was causing at least EF3 level damage and leaving a visible scar on the ground. The tornado then began to approach Highway 45 alternate, where several cars were unknowingly driving directly into its path. One of these motorists was Lynn Davis, who was traveling southbound and unfortunately didn't realize what he was driving into until it was too late. The tornado crossed over the highway and picked Lynn and his truck up off of the ground, and they both began orbiting around the tornado. It was also at this moment that the tornado began to impact the small community of Chapel Grove. It was here that the tornado inflicted incredible damage to several well-built brick homes, completely sweeping them off of their foundations and severely scouring the ground. Just after passing through the small community, though, the tornado began to weaken. Lynn Davis and his truck had been suspended in the air all of this time, but as the tornado's winds weakened, gravity finally won out and they both began to fall back to the earth. Lynn and his truck came crashing back down in Chapel Grove, and unfortunately he did not survive the impact. Lynn and his truck were in the air for an astounding 1.7 miles before they both came crashing back down. This is the furthest known distance a tornado has ever carried a vehicle. The same tornado continued for approximately another 10 miles before finally dissipating just to the north of Amory, Mississippi. The storm would cycle almost immediately and produce an even stronger tornado, which would go on to be known as the Smithville EF5. In the days and weeks following the super outbreak, the National Weather Service gave the New Wren tornado the official rating of EF3 with estimated wind speeds of 150 miles per hour. However, back in the damage path of the tornado, several well-built homes were completely leveled, and the furthest known instance of a vehicle getting thrown by a tornado occurred. So why wasn't this rated higher, you ask? Well, it's actually not the typical reason you would expect with most controversial tornadoes. It's actually because the National Weather Service never surveyed this area of damage. Understandably, the National Weather Service had a monumental task with surveying after the super outbreak, as over 300 tornadoes occurred, but the official reasoning given was a lack of funding. Independent researchers would conduct their own surveys years later using photos and videos of the damage, and would come to the conclusion that this tornado was almost certainly of EF5 strength. Next up is number 6, and we have the most recent tornado to be featured on this list, which is the Greenfield, Iowa tornado from May 21st, 2024. On May 21, 2024, an outbreak of severe weather and tornadoes was expected across numerous different states, and as a result, the Storm Prediction Center issued a large moderate-risk area centered over Iowa. Supercells formed during the early afternoon across eastern Nebraska and southwestern Iowa and raced northeast at speeds up to 60 miles per hour. As the cluster of supercells marched across southwestern Iowa, they quickly became tornadic and began producing. The first tornado was brief near Red Oak, and a second formed just minutes later to the southeast near Nyman. This new tornado was much more significant and raced northeastwards over mainly open fields. As the tornado passed just north of Villisca, another new area of rotation was quietly and rapidly forming to its south. While the northern tornado was the primary focus at the moment, the new tornado touched down just southeast of Villisca. Initially, this new tornado, which actually formed as a landspout, was very weak, but that would soon change. As the new tornado approached the town of Corning, it crossed over Highway 148 where it was now inflicting EF2 level damage. It would also toss a motorist car from the highway, sadly killing the occupant. The two tornadoes were now tracking less than 7 miles apart, and while the southern tornado continued to strengthen, the northern one was nearing the end of its life. The northern tornado, which would later become known as the Carbon tornado, ends up dissipating a few miles later and is eventually rated as an EF3. The southern tornado would continue on its northeast trajectory, remaining over mainly open fields for the time being. As it approached Orient, though, it had significantly strengthened and began to affect more structures, now producing low-end EF4 level damage. It was at this point, though, that the tornado's path became alarming, as it looked to be aiming for the town of Greenfield, Iowa. Initially, it looked like the tornado might skim the west side of town, when something alarming began to happen. Normally when tornadoes begin to weaken, they turn to the north, but all tornadoes so far in the day had done something unusual towards the end of their lives, which is turned to the east, and this tornado was beginning to do the same thing. The problem was that this subtle turn of trajectory now placed downtown Greenfield directly in the path. As the tornado made its final approach to the town, 2 mobile radar trucks sat on opposite sides of it measuring its wind speeds. At 3:35 p.m., the tornado enters the southwest corner of Greenfield and immediately begins causing catastrophic damage. At this point, the tornado was shrinking in size, which actually concentrated its power even more. The tornado was wiping house after house clean off of its foundation, and just a couple of minutes after entering town, it exited on the eastern side. It would continue its weakening trend and would dissipate about 3 miles after clearing town.
The one plus that there
the same storm almost immediately produced another tornado, which just barely missed Greenfield and one of the mobile radar trucks as well.
It could have been
worse.
worse.
The same storm system would go on to produce several more tornadoes over the span of the next few hours as it continued moving east. The next morning, the National Weather Service personnel arrived in Greenfield to begin the damage survey. After an extensive survey,
look at that,
the team gave the
focus
Greenfield
one,
tornado the formal rating of EF4, with estimated wind speeds of 185 miles per hour. This would immediately draw controversy, as numerous well-built structures were completely leveled in town. The most interesting piece of evidence regarding damage, though, actually involved concrete parking stops. One particularly newly built parking lot in town exhibited severe damage, with several concrete parking stops failing in the same manner. My good friend Ethan Moriarty of June 1st, who is a mechanical engineer, ran the numbers in a video on what wind speeds would be needed to do this damage.
Shout out June 1st.
He did 2 separate calculations to estimate wind speeds. The The first calculation
this man's a
assumes that the
whiz.
concrete had no weak points and was not affected by other debris.
We plug all of that in, and that just leaves behind our V term. So we solve for V, and we get a final answer of 414 feet per second, or 283 miles per hour.
He then performed a second calculation, which assumes that the concrete was weaker or was impacted by debris.
We redo our equations again in the sum of forces in the x direction, as well as solving for V here, and we get 363 feet per second, or 247 miles per hour.
As a reminder, the threshold for an EF5 rating is winds in excess of 200 miles per hour, so both of these calculations would firmly place this damage in that category. Of course, there are still some unknowns here which could have further weakened the concrete, but either way the calculations are still a very compelling argument. On top of all of this, though, was the information that would eventually come from the mobile radar truck teams who were collecting data on the tornado.
Yeah.
Just a day after the tornado, the Doppler on Wheels team published their initial findings, which recorded wind speeds of at least 250 miles per hour. 1 month later, though, the Doppler on Wheels team would continue to pile on when they announced that they had likely recorded an instantaneous wind gust of 318 miles per hour in the tornado. If true, this would have been one of the top 3 fastest ever verified wind speeds on Earth, and over 100 miles per hour higher than the threshold needed for an EF5 rating. Moving up one more spot to number 5, and we get to the infamous El Reno tornado from May 31st, 2013.
Let's talk about it.
If you clicked on this video, you know about this tornado and its lore, and expected it to
Everybody
be on this
does.
list, but for those who don't, let me explain. On May 31st,
Go right
2013,
ahead, brother.
a dangerous day of thunderstorms and tornadoes was expected in central Oklahoma, and by late afternoon, storms had violently erupted about 30 miles west of Oklahoma City near El Reno. At approximately 6 p.m., a tornado touched down just to the southwest of El Reno,
We
and moved
know.
slowly to the southeast. From the outset, the tornado was a multi-vortex, which is essentially a collection of mini-tornadoes orbiting around the base of the parent tornado. This began causing problems for chasers fairly early on, with many chasers becoming fixated on these smaller sub-vortexes and not realizing how close they were to the actual parent tornado. Luckily, up to this point, nobody had been impacted, though there were a few close calls, but that would soon change as the tornado began to shift its track. Up to this point, the tornado had been primarily moving east-southeast at the manageable speed of 20 miles per hour, but then something began to change. As the tornado approached Highway 81, it suddenly accelerated from 20 miles per hour to over 50, made a hard turn to the north-northeast, and began expanding rapidly, all at the same time. It was at this time that a storm chaser named Richard Henderson and the Twist-X crew, which consisted of Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Young, who were north of the tornado, were struck by the erratic twister and would sadly not survive. At the same time as the tornado was impacting the storm chasers, it reached its peak width of 2.6 miles wide, the widest tornado in recorded history. Also at this moment, a mobile radar truck, which had been recording data on the tornado during its life, recorded wind speeds of at least 313 miles per hour just above ground level. This is one of the highest wind speeds ever recorded on Earth. The tornado continued moving northwards and began to overtake Interstate 40. While over the highway, the tornado impacted several motorists and sadly would claim another 2 lives before weakening and dissipating shortly thereafter.
This tornado did not go over the city.
The El Reno tornado would claim a total of 8 lives and is the first tornado on record to have killed storm chasers. In the days following the tornado, the National Weather Service began its damage survey to assign a rating. They found that for the most part, the tornado had remained over open fields and concluded that the highest damage it caused was of EF3 level, and it was primarily rated as such. It would remain at this rating until the wind speeds from the mobile radar truck became public, and the rating was then upgraded to EF5. The EF5 rating begins at 201 miles per hour, and the winds in the El Reno tornado were measured to be at least 313 miles per hour, placing it firmly above that threshold. The EF5 rating lasted approximately 3 months until August 30th, 2013, when it was revised once again. The tornado was downgraded back to its original EF3 rating, with officials stating, quote, "Despite the radar-measured wind speeds, the survey team did not find damage that would support a rating higher than EF3. While the wind measurements from the mobile radars are considered reliable, National Weather Service policy for determining EF ratings is based on surveys of ground damage." The publicly available wind speeds, combined with the fact that this is one of the rare tornadoes to have actually been rated EF5 before being downgraded, firmly places it as one of the most controversial tornadoes of all time. Inching up on the list now to
Y'all
the
lucky
number
that
4
tornado.
entry,
I
and we
guarantee
get to
it would have
the
been
Valonia,
EF5 and went
Arkansas
over.
tornado from April 27,
We reacted to
2014.
Valonia.
On April
Yeah.
27, 2014, an extremely volatile
Yeah.
atmosphere
Y'all lucky
developed over
the
Arkansas,
El Reno
promoting the
tornado
Storm
didn't
Prediction
go
Center
over
to issue a
us
rare
like a
high-risk for
city or something.
thunderstorms and tornadoes. By late afternoon, thunderstorms were explosively developing,
plenty of
and at
damage to
7:06
survey.
p.m., a tornado touched down about 20 miles west of Little Rock. Normally, it takes tornadoes a little while to strengthen fully, but this one was different. Within just 30 seconds of touching down, the tornado had already expanded to over a half a mile wide and was producing severe damage. As the tornado passed over Canis Road, it swept away several houses and claimed its first 3 victims. After passing through this area, the tornado would continue to gradually strengthen, beginning to scour the ground and debark trees. The situation was growing even more dangerous for anyone in the path, as the tornado was now becoming heavily rain-wrapped, meaning that rain bands obscured it and made it nearly invisible at times. For an extended period of time, the tornado remained over mainly rural forests, but now had its sights set on the River Plantation subdivision, and it was here that the tornado would do something unbelievably horrifying. One of the families directly in the path of the oncoming tornado was the Greer family, so the couple went to shelter in their pre-installed above-ground storm cellar. When the tornado hit, it ripped the home from its foundation and lifted a chunk of debris which then impacted the storm cellar. This debris impacted the shelter's door, causing it to cave in and fail. Both of the occupants were then pelted by debris, and sadly Helen Greer would not survive. Her husband did, but sustained major injuries. Next up in the path was the town of Mayflower, where the tornado would continue to produce severe damage and claim an additional life. After striking Mayflower, the tornado would continue racing northeastward at speeds of up to 50 miles per hour. After a brief weakening phase, the tornado rapidly re-intensified and now had its sights set on Valonia. By the time the twister began to enter town, it was producing its most severe damage yet. Home after home was being completely swept away, with the debris being finely granulated. Trees and bushes were debarked, and cars were also mangled beyond recognition. Amazingly though, despite the damage here, the tornado was actually still getting stronger, and was now aiming for the Parkwood Meadows subdivision. Parkwood Meadows was a brand new subdivision of tightly built houses that unfortunately stood no chance when the tornado hit. Most of the homes were leveled entirely here, with additional fatalities occurring. After passing through here, the tornado would continue moving northeast and begin to weaken, before it finally dissipated about 8 miles later. The twister had remained on the ground for approximately 1 hour and claimed a total of 16 lives.
That's crazy.
The National Weather Service had a lot to survey, as the tornado impacted 2 large towns and countless other rural homes along its 41-mile-long path. The main area of focus, though, was the Parkwood Meadows subdivision, where the worst damage occurred. The damage, at a glance, appeared to be a lock for an EF5 rating, but when surveyors took a closer look, they found some alarming details. They found that, while the homes were brand new, they were built with shortcuts that made them much more susceptible to tornadoes than usual.
Bet you they ain't
Instead of
charged
using
no
proper
shortcut.
anchors like bolts, the builders chose cut nails, which was a cheaper option. Cut nails essentially provide no resistance to extreme winds and fare much worse in strong tornadoes than anchor bolts. Despite the extreme damage, with this new information coming to light, the National Weather Service issued the final rating of EF4 for the Valonia tornado, with estimated wind speeds of 190 miles per hour.
I get
Moving
it,
up to number
but
3 on the list, and we're going to be discussing the Mayfield, Kentucky tornado, which occurred on December 10, 2021. On December 10, 2021, an outbreak of severe weather and tornadoes was expected across portions of the Midwest and southern U.S. In turn, the Storm Prediction Center issued a moderate risk in anticipation of the oncoming tornado outbreak. Several different storms would form in a handful of states during the late afternoon and early evening, but the main one of interest developed in northeastern Arkansas. This storm would produce 4 relatively brief and weak tornadoes before eventually producing its first monster. Just east of Jonesboro, the storm produced a large tornado that remained on the ground for 81 miles, claimed 9 lives, and was rated as an EF4. This EF4 lifted near Sandburg, Tennessee, and the storm would quickly produce another 3 brief and weak tornadoes as it regained its strength. The supercell quickly produced another large tornado near Woodland Mills, Tennessee, and this one would prove to be even stronger. It didn't take long for this tornado to become violent, as by the time it entered the town of Casey, Kentucky, it was already causing EF4 level damage and was sweeping many structures off of their foundations. After exiting Casey, the tornado would continue racing northeastwards, with the town of Mayfield now directly in the crosshairs. The twister entered the Mayfield city limits around 9:25 p.m., still at EF4 intensity, where it would obliterate several well-built structures and wipe the foundations clean of debris. After passing through Mayfield, the tornado would continue to impact smaller towns and neighborhoods, bouncing between EF3 and EF4 intensity. Further downstream, though, sat the town of Bremen, and the tornado was rapidly intensifying as it approached. One of the buildings in town that took a direct hit was a well-built house, which was completely destroyed and the foundation was swept clean. The severe scouring of the ground and debarking of trees also began as the tornado moved through Bremen. The twister would gradually weaken as it moved out of Bremen and continue moving northeastward. A combination of less favorable terrain and the parent storm's inflow being disrupted by other storms would cause the once powerful tornado to continue to weaken and finally dissipate near Hickory Corner. The tornado was on the ground for a whopping 165 miles, almost 3 hours, and claimed an additional 58 lives. The damage survey began the following day, and the National Weather Service faced a monumental task. Several areas along the path had suffered EF4 level damage, but the strongest case for EF5 level damage was the home in Bremen. After surveying the house in question, the National Weather Service agreed that it was indeed a well-built house with the slab swept clean, but there was a catch. Although the house in question was well built and anchored properly, and the slab was swept clean, the surveyors noted that some nearby trees were left relatively untouched. Although the house was very well built, the surveyors also stated that it could have been built a little bit better, which may have also warranted a higher rating.
Now we're making
After
excuses.
the survey was completed, a formal rating of EF4 with estimated wind speeds of 190 miles per hour was given to the Mayfield tornado. Now there's a couple obvious points here that make this rating controversial. The first is that the survey team initially stated that the house was well built and anchored properly, but then came back and basically said that it still could have been built better. The second point concerns the trees which were located on the property. The survey team noted that many of the trees on the property did not sustain the level of damage that they felt would have warranted a higher rating. The first thing to mention here is that this tornado occurred in December, so none of the trees would have had leaves on them, which in turn would have made them more resistant to tornadic winds than normal. The other problem with the tree consensus is that, like the EF scale in general, it's incredibly subjective. Take for instance this piece of information which comes directly from the National Weather Service themselves. In this photo, which the National Weather Service labels as clear EF5 level damage, we can see a tree mere feet away from the destroyed house which is still very much standing. This extreme subjectivity is not an isolated incident here. It has been and likely will continue to be an ongoing problem which will cause more controversy in future tornado ratings. Moving up to number 2 on the list, and we're going to be discussing the Chickasha, Oklahoma tornado, which occurred on May 24, 2011. The severe weather set up on May 24, 2011 was concerning to say the least, as forecasters anticipated a major tornado outbreak. In turn, the Storm Prediction Center issued an extremely rare high risk for thunderstorms and tornadoes centered over mainly Oklahoma. By mid-afternoon, an arc of supercells had developed in western Oklahoma and was marching east towards the Oklahoma City metro. One of these storms was moving over the city of Chickasha, where it would produce a tornado. The twister touched down on the southern side of the city and immediately began producing EF2 level damage as it raced northeast. By the time it had exited Chickasha, it had widened significantly and continued to strengthen rapidly. Upon reaching County Road 1350, the tornado was now debarking trees, scouring the ground, and completely leveling well-built houses. By the time the tornado had entered the northern portion of Blanchard, it was producing its worst damage. Severe ground scouring and tree debarking continued here, and now the tornado was throwing vehicles up to 600 yards away and ripping the asphalt off of the roads. The tornado, which had been much larger before entering Blanchard, had shrunken slightly, funneling its violent winds into an even narrower area. After exiting Blanchard, the tornado slowly began to weaken and would finally dissipate on the northern side of Newcastle after remaining on the ground for 32 miles. Following the tornado outbreak, the damage survey began with the focus on the worst damage, which occurred in Blanchard. The damage survey team initially noted a few buildings here as possible EF5 candidates, including a unique steel-reinforced concrete dome home that suffered major damage. The home was assaulted by flying debris, which severely damaged the exterior and even cracked part of the frame. Another home which suffered possible EF5 level damage was this one. Upon inspecting,
if y'all call it out, there has been a few times your boy has been nodding. Look, your boy just got off of doing like a 12-hour shift. It takes me like an hour to get to the house. It takes me an hour to get there. I've been pretty much out the house for 14 hours. Then I get here. I'm doing this video. I'm enjoying the video. I want to point this out. Your boy's just exhausted. Apologies. we will finish the
In
video.
this home and all the others, though, for possible EF5 level damage.
But if y'all
was
have
this one.
noticed, your
Upon
boy has
inspecting this
been
home and all the
nodding,
others, though,
and my
the
eyes
survey
have
team gave the
gotten
final rating
extremely
of EF4
heavy.
with estimated wind speeds of 200 miles per hour, or 1 mile per hour short of EF5 for the Chickasha tornado. Despite the incredible damage that this tornado caused, the survey team couldn't justify an EF5 rating based on the damage they had found.
Doesn't make
The
sense.
surveyors said of one home,
To me,
for instance, quote,
doesn't make
candidate
sense.
for EF5, brick veneer, well-built home. Some anchor bolts were missing nuts, and some sill plate attachments used cut nails. The remaining sill plates showed straight nail studs, wind furrowing and nearby ground scouring, and some trees mown to stubs, and automobiles lofted 300 to 600 yards suggests this area was plausibly EF5, but the known DI couldn't fully support it. Moving up one last time to the top spot on the list, and it's actually a tornado from the same tornado outbreak. This one is the Goldsby, Oklahoma tornado, also from May 24th, 2011. This tornado initially developed near Bradley, Oklahoma from a separate supercell just a few moments after the previously mentioned Chickasha tornado developed. Just like the other tornado, this one also rapidly intensified and within just a few miles of touching down was already producing at least EF3 level damage. Rapid intensification would continue, and just moments later the tornado began debarking trees and severely scouring the ground, all while now producing EF4 level damage. Homes in this area were leveled, and the debris was completely swept away. After passing through this area, it briefly weakened but would fully re-intensify as it entered the towns of Dibble and Washington. Once again, the tornado was causing severe damage in this area, completely leveling well-built houses and sweeping the debris from the foundations. After passing through Washington, the tornado would begin a weakening trend and would fully dissipate a few miles later on the west side of Goldsby, after remaining on the ground for 23 miles. Damaged surveyors would soon descend upon the damage path to inspect the homes that were completely swept
Let me guess,
off
they
their
weren't built well
foundations.
enough.
Compared to the Chickasha tornado, this tornado caused more instances of EF4 damage, which in turn obviously gave the surveyors more to do. While approximately 30 buildings suffered at least EF4 level damage, two in particular caught the surveyors' eyes. The first was a house that was located on Highway 76. According to the surveyors, this was a very well-built house that was completely leveled and the debris was swept away. The second instance was another house, which was also completely leveled slightly further downstream. This home was also reduced to a bare slab and had anchor bolts spaced every 2 feet, which is well above the standard anchoring required for an EF5 rating. However, after surveying these two
What are
homes
we
and
doing?
the others impacted by the tornado, the survey team once again issued the final rating of EF4, with estimated wind speeds of 200 miles per hour, or
It just
just 1
seems like
mile
they're
per
being
hour short
lazy,
of the
like-
EF5 threshold. Just like with many other tornado ratings, this one came down to subjectivity and contextual discrepancies.
Yeah.
The biggest contextual discrepancy regarding the Goldsby tornado, though, concerns the house that we just talked about. Initially, the damage at this house appeared to be clearly EF5 level, but when investigators looked more closely, they found that during the tornado, a large mobile home frame had smashed into the house, and a jacuzzi found in the rubble behind the house was still usable. This, along with minor contextual discrepancies in other houses, was the reason that the Goldsby tornado was not rated higher. We have undoubtedly seen many controversial
At
tornadoes
this point,
in recent
I
years, and with
could-
the National
I-
Weather Service
y'all
now
could hire
revising
me
and
to
upgrading the Enderlin tornado
measure
to EF5.
damage
We
of
have to wonder
tornadoes.
if this is the beginning of a change,
What?
and if they may start doing the same for other tornadoes in the past. Well, there you have it. That's my list. Let me know what you would have done differently, and if there's any other tornadoes that you think should have been on this list, and you might just see it in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys.
I'm sure there's some more tornadoes, of course. Good video, CF Productions. Hey, look, your boy is just, I'm exhausted. Again, I'm exhausted. Hey, if you caught when I was nodding off, you can put the timestamp and put the time on it too. I'm not editing it out. I'm not. Hey, your boy's honest. But hey, look, I hope y'all like this video. On the road to 1,000 subscribers. Again, appreciate y'all, man. It's your boy J Osh, and I'm out. He.